Hello Year 11, so this week we are going to do some revision of A Christmas Carol and specifically mood and atmosphere, how it is used in Christmas Carol. So when we first originally read A Christmas Carol, we did do a little bit of a mood and atmosphere section when we read Stave 1. So I want you to think about what mood is created in the beginning of A Christmas Carol. Can you remember a quotation? There might have been something about a bell or about the fog, something happening to the fog. And can you explain what the effect of this quotation has on the reader, please? Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes to have a go at this. Okay, so we have thought about this a little bit before and we have spoken about fog, but I just wanted to remind you of some of the key details. So make me a mind map in your books, please, and we're going to have a think about it. So what do we associate with fog and why? So fog is obviously that mist that comes over sometimes and it tends to block our views. So how we associate that with obviously A Christmas Carol is, first of all, we know that London did face something called the London smog. And essentially what happened was when the Industrial Revolution took off, all of the machines from the factories were producing so much kind of smoke and obviously harmful gas from the machines working that it created this kind of dark smog over London that did kind of create a constant fog around London, and it made it, quite a kind of hard place to live in and to work in. So there's that sort of symbolisation, of actually what was happening during the time period. The second thing is obviously fog is usually attached to coldness. So we also have this suggestion that whenever fog is involved, it's the suggestion that it's cold and icy, which makes us think obviously about Scrooge as a character because he's very cold and icy towards people. But it also makes us think about the lower classes and what sort of situation they were in during this time. You imagine it being really cold and you not having anywhere to live and being homeless on the streets. Obviously, that would have a huge impact on you. We also have thought about this idea of the fog reducing visibility. So you can't see things as clearly as you might like to. So we spoke about the fact that potentially sometimes Scrooge, it's almost like he has a fog glaze over his eyes and he's not able to see everything that he perhaps should around him. So he's not able to see the suffering of the lower classes because he's got this foggy view. And obviously what we would expect to see throughout the novella is the fog lifting so that Scrooge is able to obviously be redeemed and to see his wrong ways and to be able to change them. So fog isn't just the mist, okay? It symbolises a lot of things in A Christmas Carol, and I'm hoping that you've written those down because they are going to feed quite heavily into the rest of this lesson. So we're going to do a very similar task with mood and atmosphere as we did with Scrooge's journey when you were in school not long ago. So what I've done is I've taken extracts from the novella and what I want you to do is to pick out 2 quotations that show something about the mood and atmosphere in stave number 1. Now this one should be really easy because there were definitely 2 that we talked about in class. So once you've identified those 2 quotations, you're going to write them down in your book for me. I want to know if you can tell me which language feature has been used. So is it simile, a metaphor, personification? I want to know what effect those quotations have on the reader. So what does it make us think about Scrooge, about what's happening, what the novella is going to be about? And also, how does it create a sinister mood? So sinister means that we feel like something bad's going to happen, something evil might be coming. How do those atmospheres feed into that idea? That should take you 10 minutes if you are doing it in enough depth, okay? So it should take you 10 minutes. So make sure that you read through this. You've got to pick 2 quotes on your own, then you've got to answer the questions down the side for me. Okay, Year 11, so hopefully you've spent some time picking out some quotations and having a think about what impact they give to the mood and atmosphere of the novella. So these are the 2 that I've picked out and I'd like you to make some notes on them for me. So the fog and darkness thickened, we did look at this when we studied the text originally, and of a church whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge. So we're just going to quickly go back over these quotations just to remind you as to some of the annotation that we made when we first looked at them. So this idea of fog and darkness thickened, obviously we've already spoken about fog and some of the implications that it has behind it, so being cold, it obviously frosting over somebody's view, the insinuation that Scrooge is obviously blind to everything that is happening around him. But then also this idea of darkness, if we think about the connotations of the word darkness, well, it means that something evil and sinister is happening. And if the fog and darkness is thickening, it's the idea that that's getting even stronger. It's the fact that Scrooge is literally, you know, absolutely blind to everything that's happening around him. And in terms of mood and atmosphere, it sets quite, you know, kind of a sombre and sad tone to this piece, because we're thinking to ourselves, is there any chance of Scrooge being redeemed in the opening of the novella? Okay, and he obviously sets that sinister mood to show us how awful Scrooge is in the beginning of the novella. And then this bit here, so of a church whose gruff bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge. So we spoke about obviously the religious imagery behind this, so a church bell. It's almost as though the church bell is a symbol of God. And the idea that obviously God is always looking down on Scrooge, and he doesn't approve of the things that Scrooge does. And again, it sets that sinister tone, doesn't it? So even God doesn't approve of what Scrooge is doing. Has he got any chance at redemption? Well, we're only in the first stave of the novella and we're already thinking not. So mood and atmosphere feeds into a lot of what we learn about Scrooge in the beginning of the novella, but it also sets up the tone for the rest of the novella, and it shows us the redemption not just through Scrooge's actions but through the mood and atmosphere also, which is what we're going to track over the next couple of lessons. So for the rest of the lesson, you're going to have a look at these quotations on the slide here. They're other quotations from Stave 1 to do with mood and atmosphere. And what I want you to do is to copy the table out into your book, copy the quotations down, and then have a think about each of the quotations. So first of all, what is the quotation about? What sort of mood does it set? And can you identify any key words and start to explain them? Okay, so just as we did with the fog and darkness thicken, just as we've done with the church bell peeping slyly down, analyse these and think about what else they tell us about Scrooge in the opening of the novella. So how does mood and atmosphere feed into this representation of Scrooge as an immoral character? This is all I'm asking you to do this lesson, so it should be done in lots of depth. There is also a show my homework quiz for you to have a go at once you've completed this.